multiple.
Well, I guess it depends on. We're talking about the trolley problem for anyone listening. It depends on how hardcore you want to be. If it's one loved one, one stranger, I think 99% of people would probably go for the loved one, wouldn't they? But if it's like 10 strangers and one loved one, now what do you do? So
I wonder if
yeah,
everyone has a certain number.
I guess that's in the movie we're about to start talking about. So I don't know. I guess we'll just jump on into it. If I'm a little wackier today, I maybe because of the weather, I didn't set an alarm because usually I wake up. It's currently 8:30, and I usually wake up like 6:30 or 7 just naturally, right? And today I woke up. Oh, it must be like 7. I look at the clock. It's 8:04. That was 25 minutes ago. So
Okay. And I may have taken too much Dayquil today because I was hallucinating a little bit earlier. So
that's good for this
I'm
movie.
back now, but I didn't even realize. Yeah, it was partly from this movie. Yeah.
Okay, let me do an intro and let's get into it then. Hello, welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where we look for the magic inside the mouse and then throw him into a black cauldron of death and see what happens with that mouse or a dog, as happens in today's movie, the Black
Or
Cauldron,
pig.
or a pig. Yeah, you can throw a pig into it if you want. This is Matt here, as always. Joining me is Thomas, the Paranoid American. Howdy.
Paranoid as ever.
Do we say paranoid? Do we say howdy in Florida? Is that still howdy land?
I haven't heard howdy in a while. I lived in Texas too. I didn't even hear it that often in Texas, but you did hear it once in a while.
Okay, I throw that out. I also throw out groovy a lot. So,
That
especially in
just dates
Japan.
you.
In Japan, that becomes confusing. Although I can say that the Japanese equivalent seems to be naui. So
Now
if I
we
that's a Japanese word from like the 70s, and if I say it to a kid, they'll have no clue what I'm saying. So, um,
I guess maybe I date myself when I just call things like cool and awesome and bodacious and radical.
okay, the first I'm down with the first two, maybe not down with the second two.
Okay.
Um, but
Don't
yeah,
have a
yeah,
cow, man.
today's movie is 1985, so I guess that's prime bodacious time.
It is.
A movie long in gestation. Production on this, they bought the rights for the books in 1973, got to work on it a little bit, and moved on to the Rescuers. That became the main focus. Did that. Then went that made this their main focus again, and then realized it was going to take a long time. And did the Fox and
About
the Hound.
15
And
years or so.
yeah. This came out in 1985, so that's a 12-year turnover, which is pretty wild. Um, this came out when I was 6. Do you remember this when it was released?
No, I mean, I was born in 83,
Oh
so
yeah,
this
you're a
would have
little
just been a
not
couple years. I remember seeing it a few times, but it never really registered as much. So when I was rewatching it, I mean, I've watched it a few times in adulthood, but it doesn't ever like kind of trigger those nostalgia factor that I'm used to with so many other Disney movies. This one didn't have as much of it for me.
see. I got a lot of the ephemera or whatever. Like I feel like I got to know this movie through like Burger King glasses or something, maybe McDonald's. I'm not quite sure which, or even if that actually happened or if I'm just making it up. I'm not quite sure. But I remember like some of the marketing. I at 6, I'm pretty sure my parents like might have like declined taking me to see it because it was the first Disney movie. It was supposed to make you poop yourself or whatever. Although Fantasia and Sleeping Beauty certainly have those moments. Um, uh, I
Pinocchio's
remember.
still scarier in my mind.
Oh, okay, yeah. Good point. Good point.
That that scene from Pinocchio is way scarier than any scene in this entire movie.
Sorry, I was just listening to. I didn't watch the 2022 Pinocchio, but I just listened to people do a podcast about it and kind of,
Well, I'm
yeah.
talking about the
No,
original
I know
Pinocchio.
you are. I
Yeah,
know you are. I just I have them talking about the new one on the mind where
I've
everything
I've
is
seen
turned into
both new ones. The
garbage.
one with Hanks and the
Del Toro.
yeah Del Toro. The
Yeah, that one's supposed to be good, right? I mean, maybe it's not. I don't know, but
way better than the Hanks one. Yeah, you can just skip the Hanks one in my opinion.
yeah, I could imagine so. Um, Other things I do remember from this time is watching this movie. I was surprised how many He-Man vibes I got because I was watching a lot of He-Man in 1985, 86. The castle looks a lot, and again, I'm sure it's not like they were ripping off He-Man. It's just the same minds, or maybe it had a same animator too that jumped ship. But yeah, the castle looks like Grayskull. The Horned God almost looks like Skeletor. I mean,
You're not wrong,
Akira
man. I
Turan
I didn't
looks a
put
little like
those
Prince
together,
Adam.
but Yeah, 100%. Like the whole like the magical sword and fighting off the skeleton army and the Castle Grayskull. It's funny because this does predate He-Man by so much, but I almost feel like He-Man is the far superior magical sword animation.
Yeah. Um. Well, although I'll give this one that Taran. Am I saying the same? By the way,
Big boy.
I'm gonna be garbage, Pig Boy. I'm gonna be garbage on the names of this because I was like a little worried. Like, am I gonna be remember? Am I going to be remember? Am I going to remember his name properly? And then I looked at everyone else's name, and we're sticking with the pig, the princess, um, Guggy. I can do that because I thought it was Dougie, but it's with G's, so I can handle that. I can
I
handle
think
the
it's
horn god,
Gurgi, but
Gurgy.
it's gonna get even worse because some of the original mythology this is based on is Welsh mythology, and I can't even say the word Welsh easily, let alone the words that they used. So this is gonna be a fun sort of butchering.
Oh yeah, I'm glad I tend to cover the production end then. But yeah, I was looking over the plot, and I was like, oh my god, these names. What the? Even in the movie, she was like, "I'm Princess." Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna call you.
My original look through what because usually when we watch these movies, I'll watch the whole thing sort of like unscathed. I stopped doing like the ahead research because I didn't want to ruin my movie watching experience first. But this one, yeah, I just wrote down like Dalben, and even though his first name isn't necessarily hard, it's a Cara Dalben, but the way that they say it in the movie, it's like, wait, did I mishear it? Did they not record the whole thing? Like, what words are they using? So yeah, that this is a interesting movie too because they move so fast and there's not as much repetition that I'm used to with the Disney movies where they kind of hammer it into you over and over. This one is just like they'll just keep dropping new names on you.
Yeah, it is of a piece. I think, despite being started in the mid '70s, it does seem of a piece of a lot of the mid '80s fantasy movies. Like you feel a little labyrinth in here. I mean,
Oh
this
yeah.
movie could have used some David Bowie, but any movie could use some David Bowie. Um, I felt like a little bit of like something like Legend or something. Tim Curry as his own horned god, horny god in
I
that
have
case.
to say that you're nailing this on the head right now because this movie has the aesthetic and the vibe of the movie that it should have been. And it reminds me of so many other cooler sort of execute. I don't want to say IP because the original IP is actually really good, The Chronicles of Prydain, but this movie in particular, the aesthetic kind of outshined the actual storytelling in a way. Disney's version of the storytelling.
Oh yeah, for sure. The main reason I'm really not sure if I've seen this before is I may be thinking of the video game Dragon Slayer.
Yeah, well, it has a very similar style to. Of course, that was another Don Bluth creation.
Right.
Um,
And Space
but
Ace.
Space Ace, yeah, I don't think you'd probably confuse Space Ace with Black Cauldron as easily. Uh, but this, I don't know. I think that there's something to be said about even like the original storyline and like that 1980s aesthetic of this, magical swords and fighting off skeleton creatures and stuff. It's not as much Dragon's Lair, but Dragon's Lair absolutely had that like mystical. They almost had like a Castle Grayskull aspect to it as well. And I don't know if they all came from the same source, or if it was just, a whole bunch, because I guess King Arthur legends, the Arthurian legends, which we'll get into, that actually is the source of some of these characters. Like for example, Henwen the pig is rumored to be the mother of this like magical evil black cat that ends up killing King Arthur in some Welsh renditions of the Arthurian legends. So, and I'm not by any means an expert on any of that, but it was just interesting to see like how far it kind of goes back. And there's lots of like even Dragon's Lair. That's essentially a reference to King Arthur in some sort of tangent.
Yeah. I do remember seeing that game a lot. We still, 80s arcade, right? Strange Prime Stranger Things sort of stuff. But
It wasn't
watching
a great game. I don't know if you've ever
no,
played it in the
no, I
arcade.
was about to explain. Like I remember watching it a lot, like maybe just looking at the demo, right, and not being able to understand what the deal was. Maybe playing it once or twice and instantly failing, but mostly either just watching it run or watching somebody else play it, and probably fail too because it was basically an unplayable game.
Yeah, no, it was game in the most technical sense of the word, but all it really was just quick actions. You'd have to hit a button at the exact moment in order to like keep the movie playing. Just imagine someone putting the Black Cauldron on and then doing like a Simon Says, and if you didn't get it right, they'd stop the tape and rewind it 5 minutes and start over again. That's essentially Dragon's Lair.
And you pump your quarters into it, of course. So
Well, yeah, yeah, that's right. That's the biggest part of it.
I mean, hey, you go
But
watch.
like, I don't think people were gathered around the Dragon's Lair machine, like, oh, Bobby over here, he's a Dragon's Lair master. All you really got to do at that point was essentially watch the Dragon's Lair movie, which it kind of should have been, right?
Yeah, well, I think people were gathering around the machine a little bit at first, though, but that's because it looked so good, right? Because
Right,
everything else
right, right.
was like what was the best in '85 video games was
Well,
even
all those were
Afterburner was
way
even out.
more
Yeah,
based. I mean, we're talking like Pac-Man, Invaders,
yeah, yeah.
Centipede kind of stuff. But that's also because those graphics were being generated dynamically and through like the code a little bit more so, or like bitmaps sometimes, like little sprite sheets. Whereas this Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, they completely turned that on its head. They looked amazing for the time. They almost look like Laserdisc esque, I guess, way before, decades before.
Right. Um, for, for this movie though, Dragon Slayer looks good. Of course, you got Bluth there. The Black Cauldron though, yeah, like the animation. This I felt like this might actually be the best animation in a Disney movie. Like I was getting my mind blown, like sort of how like Fantasia, Snow White did again. Like they had that level of detail in this movie, which I've been not complaining, but noting that the past several movies have not. So
Well, and that actually brings up an interesting note that I realized when watching this, and that's that not every Disney movie, but whenever Disney works on a new type of animation process, and I think this was
I
technically like their first computer animated or
a man in the
assisted.
chair for you on that in a moment.
Okay, you can do the part. But the interesting part of this is that a lot of these Disney movies, as they open up, they tend to show their level of technology and how they deal with like parallax movement. So they'll, like, on the very earlier movies, we would kind of see maybe like 4 to 5 to 6 different planes, but it was very obvious at some points when it was just the camera kind of zooming in and you saw that cellophane, or like the drawn cells kind of getting closer, farther away. They could add like a little bit of a blur effect to it. And then as it goes, they'll make it a little bit more complex. So in Black Cauldron, in the opening scene, the same thing. They're doing this like this slow, zoom in, and you can see the foreground and the background. There's at least like, oh, I'm just gonna throw a number, but it seems like there's 8 or 9 different levels. But the way that they're zooming it, and as they pan left and right, it almost looked like a really awesome point and click adventure game that you would have seen in maybe like the mid 90s or something, with like lots of different planes and parallax movement. So I just
Monkey
thought that was
Island.
really cool. It gave such a weird vibe.
Yeah, yeah. Space Quest. I played those Kings. I played King's Quest a little bit. Yeah, yeah. Space Quest was my jam. So,
Yeah, it I almost wanted it to turn into like a classic Sierra point and click game once that intro started opening up.
as far as animation, as with many burgeoning technologies, most of this was still done with Xerox machines. They still use them a lot. They didn't have caps yet because this movie looks like it used caps, right? Almost. It's called APT, Animation Photo Transfer Process. As said here, it would enhance the technology, which blah blah. First, the rough animation would be photographed onto high contrast lithographic film, and the resulting negative would be copied onto the plastic cell sheets that would transfer lines and the colors, which eventually eliminated the hand inking process. I don't really know what I just said because I'm not deep in animation, but it's something a little different. There are a few computer animated elements here. The cauldron itself, I believe, is early CG. Some of that green mist and stuff is CG. So this is
I
actually
feel like it
cool.
was done well. Nothing stood out as dating itself in terms of effects and animation, I don't think. I mean, obviously it's got the 80s aesthetic that we were talking about, but
Mm.
it definitely didn't have that same crude Xerox look that 101 Dalmatians. Every once in a while, it looked like someone just showed you something that had been copied in the office copier like 80 times. Like you'll see a dog under a couch somewhere and it's still got like, dirt and specks all around it. Felt like either the technology had advanced quite a bit since then, or that they just spent a lot more time cleaning this one up.
Yeah, I think well, yeah, they had a lot of time to make this movie, but
Yeah,
they
15 years, right?
you use that process in the parts where specifically no one's going to notice it because it's still easier and cheaper, and then you use your newer techniques when like you have an orb of light, right? You can't really get away with a glowing orb of light with that kind of technique. You actually do need a computer for that. So it is a pretty I like that. I like cobbling together like several methods. And again, if this movie like had a little bit more of a compelling, drive to it, it might be one of the best Disney movies. Um, I will say, I think I brought up before the old Tokyo Disneyland attraction that was in the castle and included the Horned God because it premiered in 1986. And I think it was there for 22 years. And I did go to it once, and it was legitimately terrifying. There were kids screaming and stuff at the Tokyo Disney attraction
Yeah,
because
I'm jealous. That sounds all. I would have loved to seen the Horned God attraction at a Disney World.
and then one kid is they get one kid to get the sword, and I think I want to say they have an animatronic dragon for that. But I mean there are clips on YouTube that you could see. But yeah, it's definitely one of those like you have to be there sort of things. uh Living here, I've watched the Rise of the Resistance ride throughs, but I'm sure I have not experienced it. So sometimes you just got to go.
I wonder how open Disney would be to mashups of their own material because it would have been so cool to have some sort of combination of Sword in the Stone and the Black Cauldron. But just imagine that instead of this wimpy kid turning into a fish and always running away, they go and they battle the Horned God.
That's
With
kind of what this attraction did, except as a Japanese kid. But uh, well, I guess it wasn't always. They could have other volunteers as well. Sure, it's a very international crowd at Tokyo Disneyland. Yeah, I'm actually going to see if I can find a bit more to say about that attraction because it is I think it's the only themed attraction for the Black Cauldron.
And did they ever have one of those in the States, or was that exclusive to Japan?
It was exclusive to Japan. Um, that Cauldron Tokyo Disney, but
I
yeah, yeah.
I can't. I'm trying to think of the scariest Disney World attraction. I
This
don't
would
know
be
if
it.
there's
I mean, that's
anything bad.
World, yeah, but
Well,
this,
yeah, World, yeah, maybe the Pirates Caribbean or something.
yeah, that doesn't really do it, does it? Disneyland, Black Culture, Disneyland. See what I can find on that. Scariest attraction. Hmm.
Oh, that's what we've talked
Oh,
about this before.
Alien
But the
Encounter.
alien encounter,
Yeah.
yeah, that one.
Okay, I think Alien Encounter actually like wins the prize for that. So, oh, it's called the Cinderella
Maybe,
Castle.
although man, it wasn't as scary as it was like Jack in the Box type of stuff. It was like pop scare. It wasn't. It was the Horn God ride, Jack in the Box type scares, or was it more of like the entire experience was terrifying?
It was a walkthrough. It was not an actual ride, and it's this very unassuming door on the side of the castle. It just says Cinderella Castle Mystery Tour. Mystery Tour. What's that? Like I went in not knowing what it was. Right. This was like
Oh, so it wasn't even
2005.
advertised as Black Cauldron or anything.
No, not at all. It's the Cinderella Castle Mystery Tour. Tour guide leads the guest into a gallery, starts talking about heroes and heroines. You see tar on the walls. The magic mirror appears, feeling insulted that the villains have been put down, and explains that no hero is complete without a villain. The paintings transform into the villains. Um, the mirror opens a door that sends you into basically a dungeon. You got a witch's laboratory, howling bats staring at the guests, a book with a recipe for a poison apple, a dark passage and dungeon, uh where do we go past prison, so it basically turns into a haunted house, but not like a haunted mansion one, but like an actual haunted house for a while. Chernabog comes up next using footage from Fantasia to show him summoning the spirits. Okay, so that's there to terrify you too. Maleficent's goons show up. They're in every corner. You see her castle. Oh, and then you see the tapestries for the Black Cauldron. Once upon a time, the world was ruled by evil. The Horned King, the evil Lord, used the Black Cauldron to blah blah. Um, and what do we fight a dragon at the end? Okay, the Horned
You're
King shows
describing
up.
what sounds like the coolest Disney experience that I've never been able to partake in.
It was
And
pretty
you had the
cool.
crazy Dumbo ride, which I'm jealous about too.
Oh, you mean Winnie the Pooh?
Or sorry, the surreal Winnie the Pooh ride.
Yeah, you should be jealous of that. Just okay. So the Horn King proceeds to awaken the Cauldron Born, threatening to kill the guests and use the Cauldron to make them join his army. Just then, the special guest, the kid they choose, points the sword of light towards the Horn King and using its power defeats the villain and his army by blasting them with a powerful bolt of light. And the hero's goodness triumphs, which seems a little wrong that we're using the sword to defeat the villain and end the experience because that's kind of a MacGuffin in this movie, right? The whole point is he doesn't need the sword.
Yeah, I mean it's a good point. All they really have to do is just destroy the cauldron, essentially.
Right, exactly. Little Lord of the
That's the
Rings, I
point.
guess
It's
too,
yeah,
but
very Lord of the Ringsy.
but yeah, I mean, I guess it was deflected a little bit, but the experience is in Japanese, so I was taking my girlfriend at the time, or I was there with my girlfriend at the time, so she's like whispering translations in my ear while all this terrifying stuff is happening. So that when you have a Japanese lady like giving you translating in your ear, kind of like I guess takes down the fear factor a bit. But yeah, I could see again the entrance to this is so unassuming, and then the experience becomes so terrifying, and it's a walkthrough which somehow makes it also seem more terrifying. If you're in a ride vehicle, you have like you got your doom buggy, you got your insulated, right? But here you just got to walk through it.
I like it, man. And when did you say that one closed?
2008, I believe. It might have been
Oh wow,
six.
that's fairly recent then.
Yeah,
There's
it was there.
probably some YouTube footage of someone going through the whole thing now.
I believe I watched it. I don't know if it's Defunctland. It might be Yesterworld, but one of them has a video about it, so people can definitely look up Cinderella Castle Mystery Tour and find a pretty cool, probably a VHS video, but you can watch it.
So that's probably the closest thing to a Black Cauldron attraction in a Disney park. It was the inclusion of it in that little walking tour.
Plus some Maleficent in Chernobog apparently, so
Right, yeah.
just to make it full crap yourself factor. So um,
I mean, if you tell me there's a Chernobog ride somewhere, I'm all in.
well, like I said, it's just a bit of footage, but he's there, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, if you had a full on Bald Mountain ride, that'd be cool. So
But I mean, when we get into the occult aspects and everything, if you want to go with the thread that Disney was casting an actual spell in Fantasia, that Chernobog scene is them tapping into one of like the oldest archetypes. And when they say evil runs the world, it's I guess in my mind, it's not necessarily that the entire world was evil. It was just that black magic was so much more accessible and nature magic was way more accessible than I don't know what you would consider good magic. Everyone would have their own version. Maybe it's like a John D. Enochian style magic where you're talking to angels that want you to swap your wives or something. But I feel that when they say evil magic, when you bring up Chernobog and you bring up the horned god in particular, what you're really talking about is ancient nature magic and sort of sympathetic magic that dealt with sacrifice and rebirth and things of this nature.
yeah, I mean, if we see Fantasia sort of like casting the spell for Disney's success, you have to return to all elements of that spell at certain points. And the last time they'd really hit this particular vibe probably was Sleeping Beauty, and even that I guess was a much cuter way. Although I did feel like the fairies in this were kind of like Sleeping Beauty fairy babies. So this is
And
about
we got
telling
to
it.
throw in too, Legend of Zelda fits into this 80s archetype with magical swords and fairies, and it was a great time, man. I don't know if I guess it was probably the tail end of the 70s too, like 70s going on 80s. There was a resurgence in Lord of the Rings, and I think just like in general, like the whole adventure thing became kind of mainstream for a while.
Yeah. Well, it's not like Zelda's died down. I had to cut out like 5 days of podcasting were blacked out because my two main
Oh,
co-hosts were
that's right. The
busy
new one just
playing
came out, right?
TO. They were like, we are playing Tears of the Kingdom for 5 days. Do not bother us. So I mean, I'm sure I didn't I don't have the time for that, but yeah. I'm sure it's fun if you got a Switch and all that. The last Zeldas I played were the ones on the DS, which apparently are the worst ones. So whatever. I don't know. I did buy a few because we have I've been getting my daughter into like old stuff. We have a Wii, not a Wii U, a Wii. So you can go to the used stores and get like I got like the two Wii games that were on the two Zelda games that were on the Wii for like $3 a piece. So she's been playing them. I got a message a few days ago. She finally wanted to borrow some CDs. I was excited about that, which was what was it? Aerosmith, Bruno Mars, and the band Sugar. I was like, okay, that's cool.
Those circular plastic things.
Yeah. Hey, I just the rental store I talked about near my house finally closed, and they sold off the last day they were open. They sold off all their Blu-ray for like $1 a piece. So I bought like 70 movies. It's great.
You get any Disney classics in there?
I got like the live action Maleficent. There weren't, obviously
Mm.
the good ones were pretty quick to go. And well, I have most. I don't have the Black Cauldron, but I had most of them already, so I didn't need those. But yeah, I was there like intentionally buying bad movies because I have that podcast where I do bad movies now. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna buy Spy Kids 4. I have to talk about it in a few months. Might as well watch it on Blu-ray.
Might as well own a piece of history.
Mordecai, I got Mordecai. I want to see Johnny Depp's worst performance. So, and there was some good stuff in there too. I actually did get which I'll finally quit calling paging Mr. Banks because I finally watched Saving Mr. Banks. That was in there, so I did watch that. Which honestly, it's fine. I mean, it's an okay movie, but I was like, okay, I didn't need to watch that before we did Mary Poppins. That's fine.
Is there a Japanese equivalent of Disney? Like I don't know if it would be like an anime studio or
Ghibli,
like is
Ghibli.
that pretty much the closest
Oh
there is to it?
yeah, we even have Ghibli Land now. A student. I asked a student, "What'd you do this weekend?" It's like I went to Ghibli Land in Nagoya. So I don't think Ghibli Land has so many rides. It has more like experiences and recreations of stuff from like Totoro or
Mm.
Senno Chihiro, which is Spirited Away. Yeah, so it has that sort of stuff. You can get in a cat bus.
So a Spirited Away ride would be weird.
Yeah, I don't really know how they address Spirited Away in that. So um haven't been there, but I'd like to go. Uh
I don't.
other for the real little tykes, there's Ampamon, which you have not heard of, right?
No, I've never heard of Ampamon.
Okay, everyone in Japan knows Ampamon. Um he's a bread Ampan is like a bread with red bean in it. So he lives in Happy Town and he's been baked by his baker. And he fights like Baikyuan, who's like a virus. But there's like it's in like the Guinness Book of Records as the franchise with the most characters. They have like 2,000 or something characters. And Pokemon, one of the reasons Pokemon keeps just evolving their Pokemon or not adding new ones is because they don't want to overtake Umpamon because that's like seems like horrible. That's like kicking Big Bird to the ground or something.
So
But
they're holding themselves back to not take them out of the history books.
that's my theory, at least. I mean, I don't know that for a fact. And but no, it super permeates Japan. Two days ago, I was teaching a kid who's like 4 years old. The lesson's basically fine. I have to do what he wants to do. I can't really teach my lesson because he has no attention span. Um, and before class, he insisted I drag in this Ampamon puppet, right? And when the class ended, he just went insane, started throwing a tantrum, and we had to let him go with the Ampamon puppet. So, like, like it got to a point where I was like, okay, just take the puppet. Maybe please bring it back because we use that for our trial lessons. Yeah, it was one of the most insane tantrums I'd ever seen. The other guy there was like, "What went wrong?" I was like, "The lesson was fine. It was after the lesson that was the problem." So yeah, so kids love their Ampamon. You can visit
Yeah,
the
the
Ampamon
programming is
Museum.
strong.
Yeah, yeah, really. I'll make sure and get you an image of Ampamon. You would not show the same kids the Black Cauldron, of course. It is more hardcore. It's Disney's first PG,
So
which
that comes up a lot. Not that it was the first PG, but that it was more for like adults or slightly older kids. And I guess if you were to compare that to like a fairy tale movie, yeah. But would this? I don't know. Does this really feel like it would be scary enough that it would scare a child just because what they've got like skeleton warriors at certain points?
well, the original cut of the movie was apparently 18 minutes longer. When they did test screenings, the Cauldron born sequence was legitimately terrifying because they'd show like these skeleton army or skeleton soldiers like getting mangled and like reconstituted, and kids were like literally screaming in the theater. So Katzenberg had just started working for Disney around this time, and I mean he took the thing to the editing bay and really went nuts, where to the point where the others were like, I guess Eisner and so forth were like, dude, don't cut it down that much, and there was a compromise basically. So especially from that climactic sequence, there's a fair amount cut. You can hear the soundtrack jump at one point where they just couldn't do a clean edit. It's a little bit incoherent because you're missing pieces. Um, but it was, I mean, I think what they had in the original cut might have they thought might have actually gotten them an R rating. So which I want to see that cut for sure, you know? Of
Yeah,
course I want
you're
to see that
selling
version.
that one. At the same time, I have to think out loud that 18 minutes never would have filled all the gaps in this movie for me. It might have been a way cooler visuals and certain scenes might have been more impressive, but I don't feel like 20 minutes would have saved this thing from itself.
No, the extra stuff would be more there to terrify you than to really add the story. But hey, a little more terror would also be fine. You know, that might make up for a bit of story chop, you know, if it's just more disturbing. Like no, take a movie like Prometheus, right? Where it has so many cool elements and the thing doesn't hold together in the end.
Which also shows at the beginning a reconstitution of skeletons and turning into other forms. So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
honestly, there's a lot of cool Prometheus links to this movie if you wanted to go down that route.
Yeah, the horn guy could be an engineer for all we know. That makes sense. Of course, Prometheus being the new go to for it's a Christmas movie because no
So
one
that would
says it.
make Gogi would have been or Gurgi would have been Daniel, right? The AI guy.
Oh yeah, I suppose so. I was thinking of the alien that one scientist becomes infatuated with, even though he's terrified of them like 10 seconds before. He's like, "What's this? Come here, little buddy." Yeah, it's like, dude, what are you doing? You know, the
Oh, what a cute little face hugger. I definitely haven't seen, this is in the near future in Prometheus. We won't go on too much of a tangent, but that guy must have known about the Half-Life sort of, universe. And you see those little face hugger things. That's not a cute thing. That thing's gonna kill you.
and you'd think the captain would understand you can run left or right, not straight when a ship is falling on you. But yeah, that's fine. I don't know. It's a who knows what you do in that
That was a
situation.
symbolism, man. It was a symbolism.
It was a big ship too, so even running left might have not really helped that much. We don't know. um, this one though, yeah. How do you want to tackle it? I mean, it is kind
Well,
of hard.
so I wanted to mention first that this movie had every element that would have made it the perfect movie, even now watching it. But for some reason, with all the cool elements combined, it came out kind of mediocre. Like there wasn't anything in this movie that really compelled me to like want to rewatch it or stop scenes and rewatch them again or even like do like a bigger deeper dive. It almost felt like a little bit of a slog to get through despite every unique element being cool, the animation looking great, but all that together, it was like the weirdest combination. It was, I don't know. It's like if you have a kid make you breakfast, you know what I mean? They put like all the ingredients in that you like independently, but when it's all combined, it's just kind of a big mess. And I guess that it shows. I don't know how many projects can go through a creative gestation period, as you called it, of over 12 to 15 years, and still come out with like a coherent vision, because that's 12 years of nitpicking and not just the final edit where they take out 18 minutes, but just that process of editing over and over that must have happened over 12 years, and people that picked it up and put it back down. You kind of feel it in the, I don't know, the anti-continuity, the lack of continuity in the story itself. But also, ironically, this was Disney trying to take 5 books and put it into, an hour and a half long movie. And even those 5 books originally were a little bit too short. The original publisher of the Prydain Chronicles wanted the guy to go back, Lloyd, to rewrite and add another book to the series, which he did, because originally it was going to be 4 books and then it turned into 5. So this story itself has this backstory of always almost like getting rushed out before everything is ready. So the original series almost happened like that when it went from 4 books to 5. Disney tries putting it together, and now here we're gonna try and take all of that and put what Disney did in the original articles and some of the symbolism into like 60 minutes.
Yeah. You're talking about too many cooks there, and one of the, I know the Horned God at one point was going to be a very large red bearded Viking. So I think that change was probably good. I mean, if instead of our skeleton god, you'd have a
Wait, yeah, the
Viking beard.
Skeletor version is way cooler than I think that one would have been a little bit more of a direct reference to the source material, not the Prydain Chronicles, but what Prydain was based on, like the actual Welf mythology. It sounds like they might have tried to go that angle originally, but I definitely like the Dragon's Lair Zelda, aesthetic that we got instead of just straight up Welf mythology.
Right, right. Um, here's Lloyd Alexander, the author's quote about the movie, which it does seem to pretty much take. I haven't read the books, so I mean, maybe I'll read the books and hate them. But he said, first, I have to say there's no resemblance between the movie and the book. Having said that, the movie in itself, purely as a movie, I found to be very enjoyable. I had fun watching it. What I would hope is that anyone who sees the movie would certainly enjoy it, but I'd also hope that they'd actually read the book. The book's quite different. It's a very powerful, moving story. I think people would find a lot more depth in the book. So he was like, for the love of God, please read my book
Yeah,
if you've seen
please
this.
don't judge me on this.
Which, I mean, yeah, I guess just watching it with the eyes of I want to see some mind blowing animation. I did actually quite enjoy watching this, uh,
Well,
this
yeah,
week. So
eye candy wise, it's amazing. It's cool to just see all of the different clips together. But at the end of it, I don't know, it lacked that je ne sais quoi where you're like, I just watched a great movie. Like there's that feeling that you went on like an adventure and you saw character development. Maybe that was part of it, is that I mean they go through the paces, but I don't see any like major character development throughout it. Like it's the same people that exist the whole time.
yeah, Turan is pretty much the same at the beginning as he is at the end. It's not like he's doing something stupid, makes mis
And he's
he
got the
doesn't
Guffin sword,
yeah, he
right?
doesn't he never really makes a mistake. So, like he doesn't, like they send him on a hero's journey, but nothing really happens as far as the hero's journey is concerned.
Yeah, there's not like the original denial and then having to come to terms and then crossing the, I guess there's like a crossing of the threshold in a way. But there's no real like atonement. I don't know. It misses some of the important elements that would have made it a great story slash movie. But just like Lloyd Alexander mentioned, and Black Cauldron, I believe, was the second book in the series out of the five books. So you wouldn't even have like watched the movie and then jumped right into the Black Cauldron. You would have started with the Book of Three, which was confusingly the first book of the series, and then the Black Cauldron. So yeah, like again, to take these five different stories that went on these like large complex tales that had lots of characters, like Game of Thrones style characters, maybe not as much as Pokemon or what the thing you were mentioning before, but to take that and turn it into an 80-minute movie, it never was going to happen. So even though they tried to just isolate the Black Cauldron story, they didn't even necessarily stay within the scope of just that one book. And what they did end up with was kind of just like a hodgepodge of like different aspects of the whole series.
I'm noting right near the top of my notes, so probably in the first 5 minutes of the movie, I did write, I suppose this is a hero's journey. Otherwise, this film goes nowhere. So I think I accidentally maybe reviewed it a bit at the start of my notes there, because in the end, yeah, it's what sound and fury signifying nothing, right? Um, so I guess you can tell us a little bit more. Who is Lloyd Alexander? How does he shake out in this whole thing? Now that I've extensively quoted him.
He seems like a fine young man. So there was a couple interesting things that I've been piecing these together through the other movies that we've been watching and just a lot of like original children's stories in general. And there's a couple ongoing themes. One is that a lot of them end up coming from like affluent families already, which makes enough sense that, some rich guy that their kid writes a book, you give it some extra reviews and publicity at a time before internet. So if you knew someone that ran the paper or the radio station or whatever, you got way more publicity than someone that didn't. In this case, it's a little different though. This didn't come out of Rich. This came out of the U.S. intelligence agency. and not necessarily like the CIA put this movie out or anything, but there's another ongoing theme that a lot of Disney stories, even animators and just like production in general, a lot of them have ties to early World War II and after era intelligence. And this is no different. I don't think that it's not like the intelligence agencies are planting people into Disney, but it's something about working in intelligence specifically, I think gives them more access. Maybe they get to travel around a little bit more and spend a lot of time like reading and researching cultures, because a lot of these intelligence guys that for military reasons go out to learn a culture of a certain people that they're living with or they're investigating, and they end up falling in love with the mythology and the legends and bringing that back and writing it up in the stories. So this one, he Lloyd Alexander, trying to find my notes. So he's got some overlap. He was at Camp Ritchie, and in World War II, he was essentially a intelligence officer. But what was interesting is that there is another group called the Ritchie Boys, and it's not necessarily paperclip area, paperclip were actual Nazis that the U.S. brought over, but outside of just paperclip, which gets a lot of exposure because of the German Nazis in there, but they also had the Ritchie Boys, and the Ritchie Boys were just people caught up in the middle of it, just regular Germans that wanted to, escape Germany and not have to deal with World War II, and they would come over into the States and work as intelligence. There was 20,000 of them, and there's direct overlap with when Lloyd Alexander was in the intelligence for the army and when all of these Ritchie boys, and he was at that base. So it's seems beyond likely that he was kind of embedded within Ritchie Boys in general. And I think they were credited with like over 60% of the intelligence that had to do with Europe during World War II. So the guy has a interesting background with military intelligence being the leading point here. And I feel like this is an ever persisting sort of coincidence. We'll call it a coincidence for now. After it happens 3 or 4 more times, then I'll start calling it a conspiracy.
Well, yeah, I guess the most fun one that kind of makes sense because watching this movie, we're talking about Welsh tales being the source, but there does does have the feeling of the darkness of a Bavarian woods, So add a little German into it, makes sense. Um, I guess my favorite obvious intelligence connection is Stuart and Miles Copeland. You know that one, do you?
You have to explain it more.
Stuart Copeland was the drummer for the Police. Uh, his brother is Miles Copeland, who and their father was CIA. They were actually born in Lebanon, or Stuart was born in Lebanon, I think, because his dad was an agent. Miles Copeland got into whole lots of stuff. I believe he started the record label IRS. So they just keep throwing out all these alphabet things at you. The successful bands, the Police. It's like, hey, everyone, we're involved with intelligence. Look at us, and they're waving their arms around. That's pretty fun stuff. So
I mean, if you look into the 60s and 70s, almost every avenue of pop culture feels like, I don't think it came from intelligence agencies, but what intelligence agencies had was the connections to all these different groups, and they would just put people that were either favorable to them or people that were willing to share the secrets or give them notes or let them come in and take notes. They kind of got more pushed than others. Like if you look at like a Haight Ashbury, for example, a lot of like those original musicians. I think Frank Zappa's dad was
oh yeah,
military
Laurel
intelligence.
Canyon. Like
Laurel Canyon,
every
huge
band
one.
has like one person whose
Right.
father was an officer. Like the Birds. I think David Crosby's I mean, he's involved or was involved in tons of weird stuff. Buffalo Springfield, maybe Stephen Still's father, of course, Jim Morrison. His dad notoriously
Yeah,
started the
Gulf of
Vietnam
Tonkin.
War. Yeah, so all these bands have someone.
So
So
so I so that analogy with how it happened in, music in the 60s, 70s, probably even still today, right? But I feel that there's a similar correlation within the animation world, and it would have the exact same justifications and reasons as why they would want to plant people in the music world to have a little bit of control over culture and a little bit of say. So why not do that with, animated movies as well? And not to mention that so many, and this blows my mind, but they would people would literally be working at Disney, go off and fight in World War II and then come back and then like continue the movie that they left off before the war started. Which is just a surreal concept of like this guy's drawing cartoons. He goes and, kills a few people and then comes back and continues drawing the cartoon. And some of that was like just baked into classic Disney animation. I don't know if that still exists today. Like if someone would be, working on a Disney movie and then get called in the service and go and blow up, a couple schools in the Middle East and then go back to work, a few years later. Just that's such a foreign concept of what happens in modern day, but that was again like original DNA in a lot of these Disney movies. And like I guess I'm not saying that Lloyd Alexander killed anybody. He was just an intelligence agent. But it's just this interesting ongoing thread of US intelligence in Disney movies.
Yeah, I just went on for not for the first time a Buster Keaton obsession. And I was reading his autobiography where he's saying like, I made a few really successful shorts, got drafted, spent 7 months in France where he almost lost his hearing, didn't sleep in a bed for 6 months, came back and, kept making comedies through the 20s that were genius. So it is interesting how you can have that like really, and he wasn't on the front lines, but it was, in France in World War One, it wasn't like a real nice place. Right. So
Yeah, it's a weird concept because now so used to people just jumping jobs for no reason, but man, like some huge traumatic event, it's like it changes your entire life now it seems. But you go back to this golden age of animation in particular, and it was like the animators, for whatever reason, that were working on these movies, they didn't come back and turn into like counter revolutionaries or anything. They just went right back into work for old Uncle Walt.
I guess you just take that experience and you just try and put it in a drawer and move on with your life. You don't want to be defined by it, that sort of thing.
That I yeah, I agree with that, but I also feel that maybe Walt was like the ultimate drill sergeant, so they go to like actual war and they're like, "Oh, this, I've been here before."
Yeah, the Disney Studios being a much more hardcore place than the shores of Normandy, maybe.
Yeah, can we stay here?
I'm gonna hope that's not the case. Interestingly, this was the last movie they made at the Burbank studio. They moved to Glendale for 10 years, and then I think they came back in the mid '90s. But they
And
because
this
this
was supposed to be their big revival movie. This was supposed to take them out of the slump. But I guess every movie they came out with was supposed to take them out of the slump, right? Until they actually got out of the
yeah,
slump.
this one ultimately got the title "The Film That Almost Killed Disney," as the budget turned out to be, in the end, 44 million. It made like 22 or 23 million domestically, so those are very bad numbers.
Yeah, commercial and critical failure on every metric when it
um,
came out.
the Disney Renaissance is 4 years in the future, so the next few films we're going to look at was that Great Mouse Detective Oliver and Company. Not bad, but definitely like turning the dial down for a little while, right? Because the animation department was almost just ended right then and there. And I mean, really, when you think about it, except for those prime Renaissance years, I mean, Disney's animation department is always under the chopping block, even now, right? I mean, especially now that
Yeah,
they're
it'll be AI soon. So
yeah, especially now that they're focusing on just making all these quote unquote live action, um, golems or whatever. But yeah, I am pretty much out. What is it? Yeah, the Little Mermaid just came out, which I don't even have an opinion. I'm like, I've already like just decided to not pay attention to these weird live action things.
well, there was an article that was fairly recent about a possible live action Black Cauldron, or at least Chronicles of Prydain, that might be coming out. So, and I think by Disney.
I mean, but actually, this is okay. If they just drop the Black Cauldron name until a second, they want to try and do a film series. I mean, that seems
It
reasonable.
wouldn't it could actually work because this is one case where the original movie itself is kind of like begging to be remade at some level. But also the one thing working against it, I think, is it's almost just like a kid's version of Witcher, right? Like great, if you like the Witcher series, then you might like this, but this is just like a kid version. Which ironically, Lloyd Alexander, I saw an interview where he mentioned that he he was able to address much more serious topics in the context of a children's series that he could if it were written for adults, because if it was written for adults, they're expecting all these like extra bells and whistles and like complexities and you know, not being able to dress things direct on, but having it more like, you know, vaguely implied, you know, fanciful sort of English literature rules. But for writing for children, not only was he able to tackle some of those concepts head on, but he was able to do it in like a much more serious way than he would have been able to for any other sort of demographic. So I thought that was just an interesting. I never heard that before, and it makes a lot of sense that you almost have to not just simplify it, but explain it in terms that aren't so flowery. And I think that was an advantage to the book series, but it was weird because they tried to like maybe scale it up a little bit, like make it more adult than the series was for the animation. So if they did it live action, they might actually here and now, you know, 2023, they might actually be able to make like a serious adult PG-13 version that could still be based on the source material with kids in it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like how you do with sci-fi too. You slip in the message. You know, you got Star Trek commenting on the Vietnam War while the Vietnam War is going on, which you could not do if you set your episode in the Vietnam War, right? So, um,
That would have been an interesting holodeck one.
that's TOS. They didn't have the holodeck yet, but yeah, but yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, I doubt people put Vietnam in the holodeck that often. Well, they're like, yeah, you know, bring up a Vietnam simulation, play Fortunate Son, right? That's the only way you can do it, right?
Turns
um,
into a Far Cry game.
so I don't know that we've been talking about the Welsh stuff, which I don't know too much about. My Welsh knowledge is basically the super furry animals, and well, I just finished doing the prisoner series, which of course filmed a lot in Portmeirion, right? But that's just a weird place in Wales.
So the book series came to be known as the Prydain Chronicles, and Prydain, I believe, comes from Prydery, and I'm gonna get all of these these names horribly butchered,
That's why
but
I haven't been saying it myself.
Prydery Fab Pwyll, I think, is the a
Sure.
prominent god in, or you know, figure in Welsh mythology. And it's long and detailed. Like if you thought Disney trying to cram 5 books into 80 minutes would have been hard, imagine trying to explain Welsh mythology as a whole into a shorter amount of time. But this Prydery is where I think the Prydain world comes from. But even more interesting that is that Henwen the pig also is directly from the same Welsh mythology. So Henwen the pig was this white female pig, and I love the animation depiction of like the oracular pig where she like puts her head into the bucket of water and just immediately zones out and turns into like a fortune teller, like hit into like hypnosis. I always wondered in the movie itself if Henwen even knows that she's an oracular pig, or if it happens like outside of her own consciousness because it's so instant. But Henwen the pig was this like white pig that gives birth to a black cat. And as I mentioned earlier, that the black cat ends up turning into this monster that kills King Arthur in some versions of the legends. So there's definitely some like inverse logic, magic aspects of that, you know, a white female pig that's, you know, the good guy that then gives birth to like the black antichrist cat that kills, you know, God, King Arthur. So I really feel like that is such a deep storyline. We could turn like entire episode just into the symbolism on that mechanic, and that's just Henwen the pig, which is the coolest character in the whole movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, probably I can Googie go well, yeah, I could he
So
definitely got on my
Gurgi,
nerves.
I've got a different interpretation on that. I wanted to bring up a theory. Maybe we'll propose a new theory here,
Well, let's
but that
go.
Gurgi is a different archetype that's not necessarily defined in the same, like, you know, young and all of their different like types of archetypes. But Gurgi is the opposite of like the wise old man or the regular sidekick or just like a trickster. He's like the annoying sidekick that specifically seems to come from movies. I don't think this archetype exists outside of movies, but you could say Jar Jar Binks is kind of along the same lines of this like Gurgi sort of character,
Well, I
And I
already
feel
brought
like
up
that
Labyrinth. They had the dog that definitely filled in Sir whatever his name is, which definitely
right,
filled in that
another great
role.
example. No, I think it was a fox actually, wasn't it?
It's been a little while since, well, not that long since I watched it, but
Although
yeah.
the fox and labyrinth, I give more credit to him because he was actually like he did things right. He actually helped them out and did things that they couldn't. I think when they crossed the bog was like his when they show some of his weakness, but he was actually trying to move the plot forward. Jar Jar Binks maybe not as much, Gurgi maybe not as much. And originally Gurgi was just some annoying little dog-like animal that, you know, the characters could have easily just ignored him and just kept on their way. And then he turns into like the thing that they have to go and save, and almost a MacGuffin, almost like an animated MacGuffin on its own. But I feel that there's this interesting movie only archetype that's been developed over a course of different movies and platforms, but it's essentially that Jar Jar Gurgi style archetype. And it's fascinating to me because they serve a purpose. Like they annoy people, and you have to know that it annoys people. Although I guess some people think it's cute and it's kind of like, you know, lovable in some ways, but I feel that that dichotomy is just like injecting a little bit of controversy in these movies.
A
I
little
don't know
more.
if it was like a misstep or if they're intentionally doing it.
I'd say the long term, not exploitation, long term expression of that archetype might be a Star Trek Voyager's Neelix, where you get 7 years of it. But that's a case where it's like, oh, the actor's really good, but this character sucks so hard. So yeah, yeah. Just since I've been watching some of that, like I like
we
the
I
actor,
need
I
to
hate
come
the
up we
character.
need to come up with a good name for whatever that archetype is, because it can't be, you know, like you've got trickster, you've got the wise old man, you've got all of these well established archetypes, but I do feel that I'm gonna keep referring to it as Gurgi and Jar Jar, but like that archetype also exists and it's been repeated enough that it deserves to have a name out there.
The Derpler.
The Derpler.
He's very derpy. Uh, there's probably a better name than that. It was 5 seconds thought. That's what I got for you.
It's beyond just derpy though. It's almost like an annoying, pesty derpiness, like
Mm.
aggressively derpy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like one of the most annoying things I think is someone with an annoying voice talking to you condescendingly. So maybe this like they're trying to sound condescending, but you can tell that there's like low intelligence coming from this corner. So maybe that's defining the archetype a little more. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think Gurgi can condescend to you.
Yeah, good
Maybe
point. They can't
Jar Jar Binks condescend to you, you think?
well, he'd try and get deep on you, right? With the whole piece of people gonna die or whatever. Um, anyway, that
And
that is
good.
that's an archetype we can flush for the most part. I can't think of an example that really worked. C3PO is kind of there. I guess that kind of functions as a because C3PO annoys you, but you're always wanting to let him be there. So
Yeah, no, I feel like we're honing into something interesting though, like this new archetype that hasn't been defined yet.
yeah, yeah.
And I wanted to mention one other interesting. I don't think I've had a chance to bring this particular topic up because it hasn't presented itself, but I really wanted to know if you've heard of this before. But there's a concept in this Black Cauldron in the movie as they're opening it up. They mentioned that some people were thrown alive, or that a person was thrown alive into this crucible of molten iron, and then it basically turns that evil essence and it encapsulates it. But there's a very real concept of that, and I think it was pretty big in Japan, called the human pillar. And it's essentially when they would bury someone alive under a building that they were putting together, or if they're making a bridge, they would usually bury someone alive along with the foundations of that bridge. The idea is that their spirit would stay with that foundation and scare away other bad spirits and kind of act as like a protector ghost. So have you ever heard of that before? I think it's called the human pillar.
Yeah, I've not heard of anything that dark. Of course, there is the concept and the whole Shinto side of Japan where, like, getting back to Totoro, Totoro is the mountain god. He is the god of that mountain. So, every place or thing has something associated with it. A business opens, there's always a bunch of flowers and plaques out, also when someone dies. So uh, there is like the god of this place, the spirit protects this place vibe. Although, yeah, the one you're
So yeah, it's
maybe.
definitely Shinto, and it was called Hito Bashira. That's essentially the the translated version of human pillar, and a lot of the time it was unwitting people or unwilling people that would be cast into this. But there's also a lot of versions where it's not just being buried alive, but I think there was a certain bell, the story about this bell, I think it was a Tibetan bell, and that when they cast it the first few times, when they would go to strike it, it made no sound. It was a completely inaudible bell, and they kept trying to remake it over and over. And then eventually, they take the one of the original engineers, I guess, and then put him into the molten mixture. And then when they remake the bell with this person that had been like boiled into it, then it finally made this like incredibly loud ringing bell. And of course, it's this is mythology baked into it, but I feel like there's this interesting archetype too of a human person being merged into some sort of like blacksmith or masonry, and that the merging of like that person and this other material turns it into magic. Like it just makes it a magic cauldron.
That does sound a little bit like the climactic stuff they cut out of this movie. That might have been the really disturbing stuff that Katzenberg was going into the editing bay about. Let's see if I can get a good description of what they cut exactly. Um,
Because it sounds like it just would have been a much more visual depiction of combining this living breathing person or evil spirit into the cauldron itself. What an
yeah.
awesome sequence that would have been. And I saw another quote too, that someone that was in the production of this movie mentioned. I'm gonna roughly paraphrase it, but it was like some of the best material that I've ever worked on that never got seen, or that got wasted, and that no one ever got a chance to experience.
We had scenes of the cauldron born mauling the henchmen, as well as one of them being dissolved by the mist. Maybe okay, maybe not quite the merging you're talking about, but that certainly, yeah, that makes sense with this particular cauldron. We got time to hit another character or two if you want to. We've done the pig, we've done the dog thing.
We've got also Care Dalbin, who's the mentor. We've also got I mean, I guess Terran himself, but also they refer to him as Ter of Care Dalbin, but Dalbin was also, I believe, like the area that they lived in. It gets a little bit confusing when you try to figure out what's actually going on with the whole entire area. But I also want to mention on the Henwen the pig, that oracular pig. There was a lot of other sort of mystical uh sort of like characteristics that were giving to pigs around this time. They had something called the Great Hunt, and this is when in Britain they would all go out and hunt wild boar, and it was a particularly dangerous thing to do because even with the most modern weaponry they had at the time, and the armor, whatever they would put on, the tusks of these wild boar would just decimate people. That you would very likely end up not coming back with the same amount of people that you went out with just to do this boar hunt thing. So the boars, and by proxy the pigs, end up becoming elevated in a lot of these old sort of like Welsh tales. So it's interesting to see how highly the pig kind of gets like in America. There's nothing magical about pigs. Essentially, you've got Babe and you've got Charlotte's Web, and that's kind of the extent, is that maybe a pig can like talk or be cute.
Well,
But
let's not forget
in
Miss
Welsh
Piggy.
mythology, they're badasses, dude. Pigs are badasses.
Yeah, well, facing a tusked boar is definitely different than facing Miss Piggy. So, yeah, the Miss
When
Piggy will beat you up
nowadays
for
you just
sure.
hunt them out of a helicopter at night anyways, with with like night vision. So
Right, right. They never have a chance. um, Maybe we should put the Horned God on tracking our Disney villains, because it seems like Chernabog to Maleficent to this one is definitely a line. Like I said, they seem to need to occasionally invoke this, ultimate dark force thing, right?
Well, and more directly, I know this is based on Welsh mythology, but the horned god goes back so far. I mean, the first thing that comes up in mind is Baal Hammon, who essentially is like the main archetype of every monotheistic god that ever, came, and a lot of pagan gods that came out afterwards. He turns into Zeus essentially, and then Zeus turns into every other god that we've kind of amalgamated since then. But that horned god is essentially agricultural gods, sympathetic magic gods. The horns typically come from a bull, and it's a reference to sacred cow worship, which is the oldest pagan religion that I think that we've kind of uncovered is tends to go with that the sun worship. You've got the Egyptians, which would hold the sun between, the horns. You've got the nature magic of Balhammon, that was again the horn god. You've got Pan, who's the horn god. Dionysus, Bacchus. A lot of them were always depicted with horns because of the same reasons. So I feel that this horned god is the same as Chernobog. It's the same that's tapping into basically nature magic.
It's weird how this stuff kind of just like subconsciously like comes out through things. I'm just sitting here looking at music I made 12 years ago, instrumental music, which features a track called Musings of the Horn God, which my collaborator named. So on a soundtrack for something called Nude Witchcraft. So man, you could read so
Do you
much
think
into
you might have
that.
just watched the Black Cauldron before that?
Well, maybe the guy that named the track did. I don't know, but well, he's currently that's my buddy who is currently trying to teach himself Scottish Gaelic. So you know, you get down these little rabbit holes here and there.
It just sounds like someone's choking, doing trills. I have a note here too that the horned god's sidekick was 100 times cooler than Gurgi was. Like he had the cool sidekick.
Oh yeah, that's I think I put a note that that's what I want to see the plush of because the stuffed animal for. That's the fun one. Um, the princess that barely needs to be in this movie. That's a question. I guess she has more to do in the books. I'm gonna guess because she certainly just is here to be a to look like Aurora and have a name that you can't pronounce. So I'm not saying her name.
Yeah, and I think too there was probably a push like every Disney movie needed to have a princess at some level, I guess. Another interesting thing is that this is definitely not musical. There's no songs in this movie. But ironically, I feel like it might have benefited from one or two. I actually
Yeah.
think that a Black Cauldron song could have worked better than Black Cauldron with no songs.
In 1985, it would have been a pop song, though. See you again,
Yeah, but
Labyrinth.
maybe then you get Bowie. Maybe
Oh
that's when
yeah,
you get Bowie in, man. So
that's when you.
it's hard to I mean it's hard to know what could have been because all we have is what was.
Although I am thinking we have not had a proper princess in a Disney movie since Sleeping Beauty. So maybe we were like,
Well,
oh
what do you
God,
find as
back to the
proper
princess.
princess?
I mean, just someone who's actually called a princess, right? Because
Well,
what
you
the
got the
red.
frog princess.
Oh no, I'm talking about from 1959 or whatever to 1985. And that time
Mm.
period, we don't have so many princesses. So, yeah, Robin Hood. Okay, there we got one there. So, well, she's a maid. She's
Well,
Maid
yeah,
Marian.
Maid Marian's not necessarily a princess.
Yeah. So maybe they were really like, oh my God, we haven't had one in a while. Please add one because we're about to, you know, the late 80s and 90s is just prime princess territory, right?
I'm curious. It probably isn't the best watch if you just saw someone play Dragon's Lair end to end, but I'm sure there's like a playthrough on YouTube. But if you were to watch just a full playthrough of Dragon's Lair and then watch Black Cauldron, I wonder which one would be the one you'd want to like do a second viewing of.
Oh, I bet Dragon Slayer is a whole lot shorter. That helps. Brevity can often be a good motivator for that sort of thing. I'm going to sit here and check what the length of Dragon Slayer actually is because I'm curious. Um, I remember a lot of screaming. That's all because you keep dying, right? Well, I guess if you have all the deaths in as well, you might get some.
Oh yeah, you'd have to cut out the death scenes, but that's a huge chunk of it for sure.
A full playthrough is only 12 minutes.
Oh well.
There is a cartoon series of Dragon Slayer. If you want to watch that, you're going to spend 4.5 hours. Oh, here's another one that runs for 27 minutes. Maybe that shows you like all of the various ways you can die or something. So
Yeah, that's just gonna be lots of screaming for sure.
yeah, so there's some ranging anywhere from 11 to 25, but certainly shorter than the Black Cauldron. You were mentioning the music. I should also throw in that Elmer Bernstein did the soundtrack, and they cut most of his soundtrack too. So,
Well, that
uh,
sucks for him
yeah,
and for us.
it's one of those things where later they, like they put it out on vinyl. It's sort of like the Alex North's 2001: A Space Odyssey soundtrack that is not in the movie, was eventually released. Dragon Slayer. The Black Cauldron itself is weird. I noticed it was not released on video VHS until 1997 and 98, depending on the country. In pan and scan, which is insane because it's late 90s and this is a very widescreen movie. Um, and it did not come out on Blu-ray until 2 years ago. So that kind of blew my mind. DVD
So
was
there
on.
hasn't been a non-pan and scanned commercial release of this until 2 years ago.
Oh, I think there was a DVD around 2008 or something.
But
Maybe
that
a
would have been
20.
a pan and scan, right?
I think just that original DVD was pan and scan. But yeah, if
Okay.
you had been waiting, I don't know. In 1997, do you care if it's pan? I cared if it was pan and scan or letterbox. I remember buying VHS and those big clamshells, gold ones that were like Fox widescreen. So and soaking those in. Um, Let me check on that DVD release. The box office reception. Let me see that home media. There we go. Yeah, the DVD did not come out until 2010, but that did include the correct transfer. So yeah, so 2010 is when you got it in the correct aspect ratio. But that's a long time. I mean, that's one of the reasons I guess no one had a chance to reassess this movie at all because no one could really watch it properly. Which I guess we're reassessing and saying the story doesn't really work. But that man, the animation is properly mind blowing. I mean, this deserves one view just to watch the animation. You can like, play some Bowie over it while you're watching it if you want. Look at the
Actually,
animation.
that might not be a bad idea. There's probably there's probably a better way to watch this Pink Floyd style, where you just synchronize the music of some album and put this on mute, and it would probably elevate it to quite a bit.
May as well go with the Labyrinth soundtrack. By the way, that it's definitely not the best Bowie. It's just the best Bowie from the mid '80s, when he notoriously did not want to make music. Because yeah, Never Let Me Down, and what's the other one? There's
Power of the Babe.
yeah, you see that's great, right? That's the best. But yeah, if you compare that with the late '70s stuff, and it's like mostly production. I think it's because it's got the digital '80s production where I like the weird analog clunk of the late '70s. So
Well, and also in the late 70s, mid 80s, it was far more appropriate David Bowie style to have like an adult, very sexual man lusting or at least pursuing like an underage, kid. That was like pretty much typical.
that was a weird thing. At the end of last year, when California lifted its statute of limitations, and Steven Tyler was sued um by one of his groupies from the '70s. And it's like, wait a minute, you're telling me a '70s rock star did it
Yeah.
with a minor? No way. It was weird because I he actually kind of shot himself in the foot because he tried to make it legal back in the day by making her his guardian so she could actually legally be with him. So there was like a paper trail. That was his mistake, making a paper trail.
Dude, people did it so out in the open in the 70s that it was, I guess they weren't really afraid of it as much. What was Mackenzie Phillips, which her dad was John Phillips of Mamas and Papas, I think. They end up having like a relationship with his own kid, and it was a wild time. It was a wild freaking
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Steven Tyler's a stand-up guy, and compared to that, so actually, I did meet Steven Tyler once, and he seemed like out of his mind, but he was like nice. I worked at a in Maine. I worked at an outdoor camp, and his kid like was going to a school nearby, so they came, and he actually came as a chaperone. Um, and he had the kids out at midnight singing on the front of the dorm. So I wasn't the manager of the camp, so I didn't have to deal with that. But yeah. But yeah, I thought that was cool. He was hanging out at our kind of like rustic little outdoor school for a couple days. Good on him.
An Aerosmith soundtrack to the Black Cauldron might have also been a nice improvement.
Would it be 70s or 80s or 90s Aerosmith? Which Aerosmith do you want to put on which how do the Bad Boys of Boston take care of the Black Cauldron?
I mean, if I could pick, it would probably be '90s Aerosmith soundtrack. But honestly, any of those genres would have been fine for this one. Not that I
Jaded,
didn't
those
like the
are
music. The music was actually really great. It just I don't know. There was so much missing from it. It just felt like such a disappointment as to how cool I wanted it to be up until it ended. I was still like, maybe it's gonna like turn it around and really make me fall in love with it. Because again, I love the characters. I love the animation. The voices except for Gurgi. I fell in love with everything about this movie except for the movie itself.
I wonder in Disney Plus, if you're listening, I wonder if a just a straight re-edit. I mean, if they have the original elements, just completely re-edit the thing. I wonder if you could like make this into a pretty solid film. Now you know that the rating doesn't matter, so you can keep in whatever you need. They also cut out some character interactions. I don't know if those would help at all, but it's just kind of like Star Wars, right? You need Marcia Lucas to actually make sense of the thing. What George Lucas shot was apparently gibberish. So
Well, also turning this one into like a game, that could also be a much better way to explore this deep, 5 book series that goes into like all of this extra wealth mythology. I feel like an interactive experience for Black Cauldron would be way more appropriate than just trying to like re-edit or, reproduce this. Maybe like a long ongoing series, but then again, why not just watch Witcher?
yeah, and play Final Fantasy games, right? So Zelda, you can play the new Zelda right here, right now.
Zelda, and also, I mean, this was one of the this was a very, very popular fantasy, almost like Dungeons and Dragonsy sort of book series that got popular, but Harry Potter, I guess, kind of like claims that throne now in that same sort of realm. And the Harry Potter game, went gangbusters. Unfortunately, I don't think Black Cauldron could have leaned on any of that at that time.
Yeah, I will say within 5 hours of the release of the new Zelda, one of my friends has sent me a picture where they had fashioned a sword and had put two swords together to make a sword. So I was like, okay, that looks fun. Go around with your sword. Apparently, you can just make like insane things in the game and then try and fight people with them. So I don't really know how it works, to be honest. um, I do feel like we're in a labyrinth of things to talk about. So let me throw the ball your way and make sure we're not skipping anything major. If
Yeah,
you have,
shoot.
oh
No, I
no,
don't.
I'm
I don't have
asking.
anything else big on this.
Okay, then I'm that was me basically saying I think I've run out of things that I really wanted to say on here. Let me just scroll through my notes and oh, I wrote my pig can tell the future is a really good pickup line in a bar or something. This is in a prison, so I guess it makes a little more sense. But yeah, if I weren't married, I'd go try that somewhere. My pig could tell the future. Um,
I love the Chronicles of Prydain, and then they start talking about Welsh mythology, and you're like, oh, I'm out of my depth.
yeah, you'd be out, or you could just say I'm a pig boy. Try that out. That'd be cool too. Well, I do the Twilight Zone podcast where we had just done the episode Still Valley, which has a witch man. He's not a warlock, he's not a wizard, he's a witch man. And has like the southern madman accent. I'm like, oh my god. And he has a giant black book that says witchcraft on the cover. So
Brought to you by Kenneth Anger.
really, yeah. But yeah, that was not the best Twilight Zone episode, but you just yeah, I fell in love with the witch man. So it's so insane.
Now that's a name for an album. I fell in love with Witchman.
Yeah, that's good. Or another pickup line. Why not? Um, I wonder what drinking with the horned god is like. Why did I write that? Okay, that's some late night writing there.
Well, again, the
Um,
horn god would be Bacchus and Dionysus. So, what would it be like to drink with Bacchus? The
oh,
the god of drinking.
that's you're gonna die of
It would
alcohol
it would
poison.
probably it would probably blur some lines for you for sure.
Oh, here we go. When they get the cauldron, this is just making stupid observations at the end here. If the ghoul eats the apple core, then the deal is set because they're like, "Oh, I'll give you the apple core." It's a joke, right? Like, of course you can't trade the apple core, but then they eat the apple core. I'm like, "Oh, you made the deal." So, little plot hole. It doesn't matter if it's stupid. If you do it, you made the deal. That's how I see it, at least.
In the military, I know someone that ate the entire apple, core and all, which I honestly think is not supposed to be great for you because there's arsenic in the apple seeds. But
My wife will eat the tail on a fried shrimp, which I don't know. I guess I'm. And then my dad was visiting, so he was like, "Oh, I'm going to do that too." But then we were having sushi and do it with the sushi, and then my wife was like, "Aghast, like, no, don't do it with the sushi."
yeah,
So apparently, if it's fried shrimp, you can eat the tail if you want to, but I don't see why you'd want to. So I don't know. I can challenge. You can take on that challenge next time you have fried shrimp if you like that sort of thing.
I have seen someone eat crawfish with the entire shell intact and just
Yeah.
crunch away at it.
I have had a soft shell crab before, so I guess that wasn't so bad. I mean, again, where I live, you can eat bee larva and locust with soy covered locust, which I've had. So
You're selling it. A
yeah.
Chernobog ride followed by some locusts. Sounds awesome.
Oh yeah, they should have given you that on the way out. That's
On the
actually
way out.
a Nagano specialty. So you have to go up in the mountains to eat some locust. Yeah. But because of the bee larva, I've not tried the bee larva. I mean, I'd try at least once, I guess. But we do have a bunch of like big metal bee statues. Like there's like three of them within probably a 10-minute drive of my house. So it's kind of weird when you're rolling up the street and there's a big metal bee statue, like 15 feet tall or something. So maybe 10 feet tall, but
Is that
bigger
from
than
when
you.
RZA came through?
Yeah. Killer bees. No,
Gales
that that
dropping his killer bees.
no, it's because it's the regional food. In Japan, everywhere is like it's like what is your area known for? Like your area is supposed to be known for some food
Mm.
specialty. So Nagano, we have oyaki, which are kind of like doughy things with pumpkin or mountain vegetables inside, and the soba here is pretty good. And we got the bee larva and the locust. Oh, and horse meat. You can eat horse, raw horse, or horse in your udon noodles. Yeah,
He just mixed that all together, and
you can
put
have
it
a
into
meal with
one
all of them.
one bowl.
You
Yeah.
can have a meal with all of them for sure. No, if you stay at a Japanese inn in Nagano, they're gonna serve you the raw horse meat, which with a little wasabi on it's actually quite good. So, uh, I'll give thumbs up to the horse meat, which sounds horrible when you say it, but they eat horses, don't they? Uh, I am a picky eater, weirdly enough, but sometimes it's weird what I will eat. So my wife's always surprised when I'm like always ordering fried oysters because I don't like fishy stuff usually, but I like fried oysters. So yeah, my taste make no sense whatsoever.
Well, when you deep fry something, it stops being the thing and starts just being fried.
Yeah, you can deep fry anything. That's right. You can deep fry whale sperm, which I've also had. I didn't know what it was
This
till
needs to
after
be
I
a
had it.
reoccurring theme is that we just always have to figure out a way to work in that you've eaten whale sperm
Yeah,
on every episode.
that's a five timer for this another podcast for sure. Uh, it's just like I actually didn't. Here's the thing: I didn't know about it till like several weeks later because a few of the other my coworkers learned right then and there, but I didn't learn until several weeks later. So it's like, oh, that thing, really? No way. Okay. So there was a long delay in the learning there. Um, I guess we'll close up shop. We will cut the fire of the cauldron. We'll stick our head in the cauldron, see into the future. What's in your future?
We'll
That's
have
that.
to cut off the supply of whale sperm for
Yeah,
this one.
that's right.
In this feature, so I've actually just put out I'm about to put out the sequel to my Paranoid Pamphlets series. So the first one was the MK Ultra that you can get at mkultracomic.com. But the second one I made with Juan, who I think we have a mutual friend in, and it's called the Homunculus Owner's Guide. And it's a 40-page pamphlet that describes how you can create and take care of your homunculus and also all the magical powers and abilities that a homunculus can give you once you kill it and use the skin of its forehead or its blood or its ashes and a number of different concoctions. And it's all based on, old alchemical texts. None of this is just stuff that we thought up out of nowhere. It is a nonfiction reference pamphlet, just like the MK Ultra one is, but it's on the concept of homunculi. So yeah, you can check for that one on paranoidamerican.com, also homunculusbook.com, which is going to have like a preview of that and maybe some more details in the background of it all. So yeah, that's the big one that I've been working on, and I'm really excited to bring that one out soon.
Do you just get one for yourself, or do you get like 40 and hand them out at street corners?
Homunculi. I mean, funny enough, there was actually a German count that is still in the Guinness Book of World Records today, with having the largest homunculus on record. But he had like 7 or 8 different homunculi for different purposes. He kept in little glass vials in the dark. But yeah, to answer your question, most of the time you would have a multitude of homunculi. You would probably just handle one at a time, but over the course of your life, you'd probably make dozens of them at least.
You'd have a
Because
nose made of
the
cast
ultimate
iron
goal is that
steel.
you have to kill it. You have to kill it and then use its remains to do something with.
Right. Um, have you seen the movie Freddy Got Fingered?
Oh yeah, where
I'm
did
wondering if when he gets inside the deer, if he's kind of trying to, do some homunculus style magic where he's hits the deer on the road and then gorily rips it apart and starts wearing it around as a cape.
I always figured that was a Star Wars reference.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking of homunculus though with that. I mean, I don't know if that's a method you would use for making one, but
Well, one of the methods is that you do and you impregnate a cow with whatever you want, and then you feed it the blood of a ewe for like a week or something, and then you seal the cow, like you stitch all of its orifices closed, then you wait for it to die, and there's lots of like burying things and uncovering them later. Again, if you want to know the full background and recipe and how to take care of it, the Homunculus Owner's Guide. It's the only book I know that will be in existence which illustrates in graphic detail exactly what you would do to create a homunculus.
it sounds like too much work. I mean, not reading the book, but making the homunculus. I can't be bothered to build an Enterprise C model that's still in my closet here.
Well, you'll be happy to know that depending on how well the pamphlet does, we might come out with a homunculus growers kit where you just order and a box just shows up and it's like, 3 steps. Put this into this thing and seal it with this thing and put it in a closet and come back and you've got a homunculus.
All right. As for this, it's the Occult Disney podcast. It's Occult Disney Pod on Twitter. Um, I do kind of thumb through my Twitter, so if you were to contact, that's probably the best place to do it. Uh, you can support us on Patreon at Podcastio Podcastius, where we do a lot of podcasts. The aforementioned Twilight Zone podcast is Time Enough podcast. We talk about the 100 best and the 100 worst films as rated on IMDb on Films and Filth, the Citizen Kane of podcasting. This week, I think, is our Human Centipede 2 episode. If speaking of things you need to have a cast iron stomach and or nose for. And there's some video game stuff. You can actually hear people who are not me go into great depth about Zelda on the Hyrule Field Report. You can hear about Pokemon. Luke loves Pokemon. And you can hear gamers gaming themselves with gaming questions on the Game Show. I just try and say game as many times as I can, that last little
You can talk
plug.
about the
So,
sword and the game show.
yeah, the swords are in the Game Show. That's right. Repeated words. Hey, there is some repetition, right? Yeah. Say something 3 times and it's going to appear behind you.
It's a classic rhetoric skill. So yeah.
say the you say Lotso Bear 3 times, he's right behind you.
Bloody Mary.
No, Lotso's there because the toys. We'll probably do a Toy Story 3 podcast at some point, but I'm doing one next week as well. So I made sure to put Lotso in place now for that. Don't want to forget later. Okay, let's get making an army of the undead. Then got some work to do.